Don't use that pen, Mr. Pemberton. Please, you can't. Aldrich Pemberton paused. His hand rested on the mahogany table, the velvet pen case open before him, and the boy who had just spoken stood 3 meters away near the tall decorative screen by the south windows. 11 years old, still in his school's uniform. A blue and gray striped tie slightly loosened at the collar. The boardroom of Pemberton and Holt occupied the entire 32nd floor of a glass tower on Burrard Street in downtown Vancouver, and on a clear March evening, the lights of Cole Harbor stretched out below like scattered embers across the inlet. Tonight it held 38 guests, senior partners, retired judges, longtime clients, the firm's biggest referral sources, and a handful of old friends from the law school years at UBC. There was champagne from the Okanagan and smoked salmon on little rounds of pumpernickel, and at the head of the conference table sat a single ivory envelope containing the founding documents for the Pemberton Legal Aid Foundation. The charitable endowment Aldrich had spent 2 years building quietly, the thing he intended to announce tonight at his 64th birthday gathering and sign into existence in front of every person who had ever mattered to the practice. Beside the envelope sat the pen case. It had arrived that afternoon, a gift from Rowena Holt, his partner of 28 years. The pen inside was a custom-engraved Mont Blanc, deep burgundy lacquer, the name A. Pemberton etched in fine silver at the clip. Rowena had presented it to him before the guests arrived, pressing his hands around the case with both of hers. "You'll want something worthy of the occasion," she had said, smiling. "Something you'll keep." He had set it at the head of the table so he would remember to use it. Now the boy stood at the edge of the room, and his expression was the opposite of everything else in it. Everyone else looked festive. He looked frightened. Jasper. A woman's voice, barely above a whisper, came from the doorway near the service credenza. Lenora Aiken, the firm's office manager of 19 years, had appeared there, a polished silver tray still balanced in both hands. She was looking at her son with an expression that mixed alarm and apology in equal parts. "Baby, come here, right now." Jasper did not move. "She did something to it," he said. "I was in the prep room. I saw her." Across the table, Rowena Holt set down her champagne flute very gently. She was 61, precise and elegant, in a charcoal wool dress, silver at her temples, with the particular stillness of a woman who had argued before the Court of Appeal many times and learned that the body's first response to an accusation was always the most important one. The stillness she showed now was extraordinary. "I'm sorry," she said. Jasper turned to face her. "You were in the prep room before anyone came. You had the pen case on the side table. You opened it, and you did something to the pen with a little cloth. Then you put it back and left." A murmur moved through the guests the way it does in rooms full of lawyers. Quiet, measured, but immediate. People in this room made their living reading signals, and the signal right now was not comfortable. Rowena clasped her hands in front of her. "Aldrich," she said, with a calm that sounded very much like patience, "I think Lenora's son may have startled himself. Prep rooms before events can be confusing places. There were a dozen people coming in and out this afternoon." She turned her gaze briefly to Jasper, and her tone shifted. Not unkind, but careful, the way you'd address a nervous animal. "Sweetheart, I know you were trying to help, but what you think you saw and what was actually happening are two different things." "I know the difference," Jasper said. Lenora reached him then and put both hands on his shoulders. "Mr. Pemberton, Miss Holt, I am so sorry." Her voice was barely steady. "He knows better than this. He was supposed to be in the waiting room downstairs watching something on the tablet. I'll take him out now." "I wasn't doing anything wrong," Jasper said. "I came up because the elevator takes forever and I wanted to see the party." The prep room door was open. She was standing at the side table and she had the pen and she was doing something to the nib. She looked at the door first. Then she took a little square of cloth and she pressed it against the tip and held it. Then she capped the pen again and put it back in the case. A retired judge seated 3 chairs from Aldrich's left leaned toward the woman beside him and said something quiet. Someone else offered the small, embarrassed laugh that people give when they want a moment to end. A woman in a blue blazer near the far end of the table shook her head with the patient look of someone who had seen children act out at formal events before and knew exactly what it was. Lenora heard it. Her shoulders tightened, but she kept her chin level. She had worked in this building for 19 years and she had heard that sound before. The sound of a room deciding someone like her did not belong in it. Jasper heard it too. He pressed his lips together and did not look away from Aldrich. "I'm telling the truth, Mr. Pemberton." Aldrich studied the boy carefully. He had known Jasper since the child was 3 years old, born the year after Lenora joined the firm. He had watched him grow up in the margins of the office, doing homework at the spare workstation during Lenora's late evenings, helping collate documents when he was old enough, asking Aldrich earnest questions about case law when he was supposed to be eating his lunch. He was not a dramatic child. He was a quiet, observant one. "Jasper," Aldrich said, "are you certain it wasn't one of the catering staff preparing the table?" "Yes, sir. It was Miss Holt. She had on the same gray dress she has on now, and the pen case is the same one. I know what I saw." Rowena made a sound. Not quite a laugh. She looked around at the assembled guests with the measured expression she used in court when opposing counsel said something she wanted the judge to notice. "Aldrich, I have been your partner for 28 years. I arranged this evening. I chose your pen, personally. I am standing here in front of everyone you have ever trusted professionally, and I am being accused of harming you by a child who was hiding in the prep room." She let that sentence settle for a moment. "I won't tell you how to respond to that. You know me." The room's discomfort shifted slightly, but perceptibly, in her direction. She had the room. She was very good at getting rooms. Aldrich looked back at Jasper. The boy's hands were clenched at his sides, and his eyes were clear and still frightened and completely certain. He was not performing. He was not seeking attention. He was doing the only thing he knew how to do, which was tell the truth and wait to see if it mattered. Aldrich picked up the pen case. "Let's just have a look," he said. He lifted the Mont Blanc from the velvet. It was beautiful, the burgundy lacquer deep and polished under the boardroom's warm lighting, the silver clip, catching the glint from overhead. He uncapped it. The nib looked clean. He tilted it toward the light. Nothing unusual, nothing visible. Someone near the far end of the table began a quiet, relieved conversation with his neighbor. The slight drop in tension was palpable, like a held breath released. "See?" Rowena said, and her voice was gentle now. "It's a pen, Aldrich. It is a pen I spent 2 weeks tracking down because you mentioned once, years ago, that you'd always wanted one and never bought it for yourself." She glanced at Jasper briefly, and the look carried just enough softness to be completely devastating. "I understand you're trying to protect him, sweetheart, but there's nothing here." Naomi Pemberton, Aldrich's daughter, has not spoken since Jasper appeared. She sat on her father's immediate right, 29 years old, a civil litigator herself at a different firm, watching the room the way she had been taught to watch rooms. She had said nothing. She was watching Rowena. Aldrich turned the pen over once in his hand. Then he reached for the founding documents. "No," Jasper said. He stepped forward. "Please, Mr. Pemberton, don't." "Jasper." Lenora reached for him. But Jasper had already moved. He caught Aldrich's forearm with both hands, not violently, just with the grip of a child putting everything he had into one last attempt at being heard. The Mont Blanc jolted sideways in Aldrich's hand and caught the soft inner edge of his palm just below the thumb. A small, clean scratch, barely enough to register. "Jasper." Lenora pulled him back firmly. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Pemberton," she said. "I'm so sorry." "It's all right," Aldrich said mildly. He pressed the slight scratch with the side of his index fingers. It wasn't even bleeding. He looked at Jasper, and his expression had crossed into something firmer than indulgence. "That's enough. Go with your mother now." The fight went out of Jasper the way it does, when a child has done every possible thing, and none of it has worked. Lenora took him gently by the shoulders and guided him toward the service door. Aldrich set the pen beside the documents. He would use it when the room settled. He took a breath and began to speak about the foundation. What it was for, who it was intended to serve, how it had come to be. He spoke for 7 minutes. He knew because he had timed the address beforehand. By the 6th minute, something was wrong. It began in the hand, a low, strange heat across the palm, radiating upward in a way that was not normal and not explicable. He shifted his grip on his water glass. The heat continued. By the 7th minute, the back of his wrist had begun to ache with a deep internal warmth that preceded pain. He had felt that once before, years ago at the cottage, when he'd leaned against a burner he hadn't realized was still on. He stopped mid-sentence. "Aldrich?" Naomi said. "I'm fine." He was not fine. The nausea arrived without warning, a rolling wave he could not swallow back. His vision shimmered at the edges. He put one hand flat on the table to steady himself, and the room went quiet around him in the way rooms do, when everyone present understands simultaneously that something has gone wrong. "Dad." Naomi was already standing. Dr. Sebastien Fournier was 3 seats to Aldrich's right. He had been the Pemberton family physician for 17 years, and he had come tonight as a friend, not a doctor. Though he had quietly noted when he sat down that Vancouver General was 9 minutes by ambulance from this address. He was already on his feet. "Everyone step back," he said, and his voice had changed completely from the voice he used at dinner parties. "Give him air, Aldrich. Look at me, right here." "My hand," Aldrich managed, the scratch. Sebastien looked at it. The tiny line was already beginning to redden around its edges in a way that made no sense for the contact it had been. The redness was spreading slowly upward. "Don't touch the pen," Sebastian said. He said at once to the room, "Nobody touches that pen." Rowena stepped toward Aldrich and Naomi moved between them without a word. She simply stood there. Rowena stopped. "Naomi, for God's sake." "No," Naomi said. Rowena pressed one hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. Careful tears, the controlled production of someone who understood exactly how visible emotion worked in a room full of witnesses. "This was supposed to be the most beautiful evening of his career," she said softly. "Aldrich, I love you like a brother. I need you to know that." Sebastian did not look at her. He was already on the phone. The ambulance arrived in 11 minutes. As the paramedics moved Aldrich toward the service elevator, he turned once and found Jasper. The boy was standing in the doorway to the service corridor. Lenora's hand on his shoulder, watching Aldrich with the expression of someone who had been carrying something far too heavy, and was finally, partly, allowed to set it down. Not proud, not vindicated, just tired and very relieved that what he had tried to prevent had not gone past fixing. In the emergency department at Vancouver General, blood was drawn at 8:47 in the evening. The toxicology panel, that came back at 11:15, confirmed what Sebastian had already suspected. The substance was synthetic, engineered to penetrate through even minor skin abrasion, designed to present clinically as a sudden cardiac event. The attending physician told Naomi quietly in the family room that her father was stable, that the contact had been minimal. If he had used the pen normally, the physician said, held it for the duration of a signature, the grip pressure, the contact time, the absorption would have been significantly greater. Naomi sat with that sentence for a long time after the physician left. Jasper had grabbed his father's arm. The pen had caught the palm in the struggle. The scratch was smaller and briefer than a signature's worth of contact would have been. She went to find Jasper. He was sitting in the corner of the family waiting area with his school bag at his feet, looking at the wall. Lenora sat beside him with her hand over his. She looked up when Naomi came in, and her expression began preparing an apology. "Don't," Naomi said. "I need to talk to him." She sat across from Jasper. "Tell me exactly what you saw in the prep room." Jasper looked at his mother first. Lenora nodded once. "She had the pen case on the side table," he said. "She was already in there when I came up the stairs. I looked through the door because I wanted to see if the food was out. She didn't see me. She took the pen out of the case, and she had a little folded cloth, like the ones the caterers use, but smaller. She pressed it against just the nib part, just the tip. She held it for a while. Then she capped the pen, put it back, closed the case, and left through the other door." "Did she see you?" "I don't think so." Naomi looked at Lenora. "The prep room has a camera, positioned at the side table, the firm's building security system." Lenora's eyes closed for a moment. Lorne would have access. Lorne Cassidy was the building's head of security, a calm and meticulous man who had worked in the tower for 14 years. Naomi texted him at 11:31 p.m. At 12:04 a.m., he texted back 4 words, "I have it, come." Aldrich was moved to a private room at 1 a.m. Sebastian sat beside him through the shift change and won 3 separate arguments with the nursing staff about the monitoring protocol. At 7 a.m., Naomi came in with a tablet and Lorne's footage. Aldrich watched it without speaking. The prep room camera was positioned high, aimed at the credenza. The timestamp reads 17:44:7, 23 minutes before the first guests arrived. Rowena entered from the interior door. She set the pen case on the side table. She worked with the deliberate ease of someone who had rehearsed the motion, not rushed, not hesitant. She removed the Mont Blanc, produced a small cloth square from her jacket pocket, and pressed it to the nib of the pen for 11 seconds. 11 seconds was a long time. Then she capped the pen, placed it back in the case, smoothed the velvet, and left. In the upper left corner of the frame, a small face was visible through the door Jasper had left ajar behind him. He was 11 years old and standing very still, watching everything. Aldrich watched the footage twice. Then he set the tablet on the blanket over his knees. "She had the access code to the prep room," he said. "She has access to everything," Naomi said. "She's a founding partner." Lorne cleared his throat. "There's more, sir. The firm's digital signing system, the terminal in your senior partner suite. The access log shows the system was used from your terminal on 11 separate evenings in the past 4 months, all after 8 p.m., all on evenings when building records confirm you were not present." Naomi looked at Lorne. "What was signed?" Lorne handed Aldrich a printed sheet. The items were not routine. A partnership buyout clause revision, a conditional succession agreement, an asset reversion protocol triggered in the event of. The document's language was precise and very careful, a founding partner's permanent incapacitation or death. Aldrich read it twice. This gives her full authority to complete the Hargreave Group negotiation. Who is the Hargreave Group? Naomi asked. A Toronto acquisitions firm, Aldrich said quietly. They have been trying to purchase the Vancouver practice for 2 years. I have refused them every time. Rowena has been the one who keeps bringing them back. He set the paper down. If I had died last night, or been declared medically incapacitated, she would have had conditional authority under this agreement to complete the transaction as my successor, before the partnership could convene a vote to stop it. The hospital room was very quiet. She would have sold the firm, Naomi said. She would have walked away with the acquisition commission and a senior advisory role with Hargreave, Lorne confirmed. The firm's core client accounts, the relationships built over 28 years, would have transferred in the transaction. The foundation endowment would likely have been voided. It hadn't been signed yet. Aldrich looked at the bandaged hand, and the documents she signed using my terminal. Your legal team is reviewing them this morning, Naomi said. The early opinion is that the process was fraudulent. They won't hold. But she didn't know that yet. She believed they would. Because she thought I would be dead, Aldrich said. No one answered him. Rowena was arrested at her home in Kitsilano at 9:17 in the morning. The house looked out over English Bay, and she had bought it, as she had told Aldrich once at a holiday party, with the first big transaction fee she'd ever earned. She had been proud of that. She had told the story often. She was dressed for court when the officers came, old habit. She had a coffee in her hand, and she was standing at the kitchen window looking at the water. Aldrich had asked to be present. Sebastian had said no. Naomi had said absolutely not. Aldrich had come anyway, in the car, and waited in the driveway while Naomi went to the door. When the officers brought Rowena out and she saw him standing beside the car, she stopped. The officer holding her arm paused to allow it. Aldrich stood on the flagstone driveway, one hand braced against the car door, and he looked at her. His expression was not anger. It was something calmer and colder than anger, the expression of a man in the process of revising 28 years of memory, and finding that the revision did not take as long as he had feared. I don't want an explanation, he said. I've seen the footage. I've read the documents. I know what the panel found. He paused. I came to tell you that the endowment is being re-executed today, with a different pen. The succession clause has been flagged and voided. Your access credentials were suspended at 7 this morning. Lorne has the footage, and it's been copied to 6 locations. Rowena said nothing. And the boy is safe, Aldrich said. Something shifted in Rowena's expression then. Not guilt, not remorse, exactly, but a kind of recalibration, as though she were reassigning weight to something she had underestimated. He's 11 years old, she said. Yes, Aldrich said, that's what makes it worse. She was guided past him to the waiting vehicle. At the door, she stopped once and looked back. I built half of that firm, she said. Half of those client relationships are mine. They were ours, Aldrich said. There's a difference. Then she was gone, and Aldrich stood in the driveway of a house he had visited many times over many years, and understood that he would not come here again. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, the senior partner's office at Pemberton and Holt was bright with late light off the inlet. The old digital signing terminal had been removed from the desk. A new one sat in its place. The desktop had been reorganized. The room felt different in the way that rooms do after something has been taken out of them that was never meant to be there. Aldrich sat in the founder's chair. Jasper sat across from him. Between them, on the wide polished desk, was a single envelope. Inside it was the formal documentation of the Jasper Aiken Educational Trust, established under the Pemberton Foundation, covering secondary and post-secondary education at any institution Jasper chose, anywhere in the country. Beside it was a second document outlining Lenora Aiken's new position as Director of Operations at Pemberton and Holt, with a compensation package that Aldrich had reviewed himself, and Naomi had described as about time when she read it. Jasper looked at the envelope. He didn't open it. You didn't have to do this, he said. I know, Aldrich said. We didn't do it because we wanted something. I know that too. Aldrich leaned back in his chair. That's why I'm giving it to you. He looked at the boy for a moment. Do you want to sit here? Jasper blinked. In your chair. Just to see what it looks like from here. Jasper thought about this with the careful seriousness he brought to most things. Then he stood up, walked around the desk, and sat down in the founder's chair. He was small for it. His feet didn't reach the floor. But he sat up straight, and looked out through the floor-to-ceiling window at the harbor, at the North Shore Mountains beyond it, at the city going about its Saturday morning entirely unconcerned with the private reckonings of the people above it, and his expression was something very particular. Not wonder exactly, but the quiet assessment of someone measuring a distance and finding it perhaps not as far as it had once seemed. Lenora stood in the doorway with her coffee mug in both hands, watching her son. She had cried twice already this morning. Privately, before anyone arrived, she had decided she was done with that for the day. Naomi appeared beside her. She looked at Jasper in the chair, and then at her father sitting on the wrong side of his own desk and said, very quietly, "You know he's going to be a lawyer." Aldrich smiled. It was the first real smile he'd managed in 3 weeks. God help the other side. Outside the window, Vancouver moved through its morning the way it always did. A ferry cutting across the strait, a float plane banking toward the harbor, the mountains still carrying their last edge of winter snow, entirely indifferent, as cities always are, to the private reckonings of the people moving through them. Inside the office, a boy in a school uniform sat in a chair built for someone older and looked at the world from a height he had not occupied before, and thought quietly and seriously about what he might do with it.